We shall move to questions without notice. Are there any questions? And I call the Honourable the Leader of the Opposition.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Prime Minister. Moments ago, Australians learned of the most egregious acts of foreign interference against our nation and our people since the Cold War. The expulsion of the Iranian ambassador from our country and the listing of the IRGC as a terrorist organisation are entirely necessary actions that the Coalition has previously called for and supports. Can the Prime Minister update the House on these developments and the actions the government is taking in the national interest?
Give the call to the Prime Minister.
I thank the member for her question and for the parliamentaries' bipartisan support for the actions that we have taken. We know that since those terrible events by the Hamas terrorists on October 7, we've witnessed a number of appalling anti-Semitic attacks against Australia's Jewish community. We've been clear that these attacks have no place in Australia. And the government asked ASIO and the AFP to investigate as a priority. And I do want to thank the extraordinary work that has been done to get to the bottom of what has been quite a complex issue. ASIO has now gathered enough credible intelligence to reach a deeply disturbing conclusion that the Iranian government directed at least 2 of these attacks. Iran has sought to disguise its involvement through the use of criminal elements being paid here in Australia. ASIO assesses that apart from these 2 attacks, it is likely that there are more as well. These were extraordinary and dangerous acts of aggression orchestrated by a foreign nation on Australian soil. They are attempts to undermine social cohesion and sow discord in our community. And it is totally unacceptable, and the Australian government is taking strong and decisive action in response. The Iranian ambassador is being expelled. We were briefed by ASIO yesterday. We went through our appropriate processes and ensured that the Australian diplomats who are based in Tehran were able to get safely to a third country before these revelations became public because of concern for their safety, and I confirm that that has occurred and we've suspended operations at the embassy in Tehran. The government will legislate so that we can list Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, the IRGC, as a terrorist organisation. The actions of my government send a very clear message to nations like Iran who seek to interfere in our country that your aggression will not be tolerated. As we face those who seek to do us harm, Australia must stand together. We briefed prior to the press conference the premiers of Victoria and New South Wales as well. I spoke with Rabbi Shlomo Khan of the Adass Israel Synagogue. We also spoke with the restaurant in the member for Wentworth electorate as well that was impacted by this. There is more investigations going on, I must say, so there was a limit to what the information that the ASIO Director General and the officials will give. Obviously, our priority is making sure that the perpetrators of this, direct and indirect, are brought to justice, and we don't want to engage in any talk that potentially disrupts the investigations which are ongoing. As I said, ASIO is very clear, the Director General, that there's at least 2 accounts. The government has been briefed, and certainly I would hope that the Leader of the Opposition and appropriate people on the other side as well take advantage of a briefing as well. This is the case that this is the most serious response that any Australian government has given. We don't expel an ambassador lightly because of the consequences of that, which aren't obviously all upside. But we do think that it is an appropriate response given the extraordinary behaviour and the direct link that they've been able to draw through a direct chain to individuals and to the IRGC.
On indulgence, to associate her remarks to the Prime Minister's.
Speaker, I rise on indulgence to associate the opposition with the Prime Minister's remarks. We are all disgusted to learn of the serious and chilling foreign interference which has been perpetrated by the Islamic Republic of Iran on Australian soil. As the Director-General of Security explained today, the Iranian government has been confirmed as having directed at least 2 attacks against Australia's Jewish community, including the firebombing of the Adass Israel Synagogue. To Australia's Jewish community, our message has been abundantly clear throughout this period of heightened anti-Semitism. All Australians have a right to practice their faith, free from persecution, free from violence and free from fear. These acts of egregious foreign interference are brazen attempts to cleave apart our social cohesion, to turn neighbour against neighbour and Australian against Australian. I therefore want to make it abundantly clear on behalf of the Coalition that while we sit opposite from the government in this chamber, we are entirely united behind the measures announced today to expel the Iranian ambassador and list the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps as a terrorist organisation.
The call to the honourable member for Robertson.
Thank you, Mr Speaker, and my question is to the Minister for Home Affairs. How has the government responded today to those who seek to spread hatred and undermine social cohesion in our country?
The call to the Leader of the House.
Thanks, Speaker, and I thank the member for Robertson for the question. I want to pay tribute to the work, first of all, of ASIO, to the Australian Federal Police and to all the state and territory police forces. In particular, all members of Parliament are thinking of the Victorian State Police Force today as well. I know the significant amount of work and there's analytical rigour that goes into ASIO assessments. They do not reach these conclusions lightly. This is an unprecedented attack on our society. It is aimed at creating fear, at stoking internal divisions and eroding our social cohesion. And while after the attacks it was described in the media that no one was injured, that's true. But people were harmed. The people who are part of that community at the Adass Israel Synagogue were harmed. The owners of the Lewis Continental Kitchen and all their customers were harmed. The local communities around were harmed, the Jewish community was harmed, and we as a nation were harmed. There is anti-Semitism in Australia. It is real, it is ugly, it is debilitating. And while this particular attack commenced with anti-Semitism originating in Iran, nothing changes the fact that these were anti-Semitic attacks, and the impact was identical. The impact on our communities, the impact on our nation. For some anti-Semitic elements in Australia, as a result of these attacks, they felt emboldened. But any anti-Semitic attack, in fact any attack that relies on any form of dehumanising bigotry, is an attack on Australia. This extraordinary attack which occurred on our soil means we have to adapt our response to a changing threat. That's why, as the Prime Minister said earlier, the government intends on changing the criminal code so that we can list the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps. This sends the strongest possible signal that this conduct has reached a new and totally unacceptable low. The existing criminal code clauses, which were designed decades ago, were intended to deal with different threats to what we are now facing. The anti-Semitism which drove this attack, as I said, began in Iran, not Australia. But importantly, we must not allow the blame to fall on Australians of Iranian descent. That's exactly the kind of disunity and division that these attacks were designed to create. Instead, Australia stands together. These attempts at division will fail. They already have. We stand together as a nation in unity and strength.
I call the Leader of the Opposition.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Prime Minister. During the government's three-day talkfest, the introduction of a new housing tax, new death tax, new wealth tax, new tradie tax and new levies on Australian businesses were floated. Is the Prime Minister aware of any work the Treasurer has commissioned on these proposals?
There's far too much interjections. Minister for Agriculture and others, there will be absolutely no interjections when people are asking questions. Prime Minister has the call.
I thank the member for her question and for a question about tax policy, not from the government but by people who attended a round table. Maybe it was the Shadow Treasurer who was raising these things, because there were people that the Shadow Treasurer, I heard him actually say that everything was up for review and that they had an open mind. I do know this, that 2 days before the last election, the member for Hume, former Shadow Minister, snuck out the coalition costings, and they revealed a $75 billion higher figure in personal income taxes. That's what they went to the election on, including the former deputy leader of the opposition. Vote for us, you get 75...
No, we're just going to pause that. We're going to get the member for Hume to quickly withdraw that so we can continue. I thank the member for Hume. The Prime Minister in continuation.
Hands up, Mr Speaker. So they had $75 billion in personal income tax increases over there. They had higher taxes on the resources sector and on the manufacturing sector because they wanted to abolish production tax credits, which reduced taxes for the resources sector. They had higher taxes on motorists through the abolition of the EV concession that was put in place. Well, this will be good.
Order. Order. The Minister for Infrastructure is just going to pause, so the manager is under the standing was entitled to, and he's going to do so.
I didn't want to be there. Why would I want to go to that?
You may not be here if this continues. So
the PM's hectoring
that's
me.
okay. Just get to your point.
He's hectoring me, not the other way around.
Get to your point of order.
All right. So, look, Speaker, I take a point of relevance. In no way was he asked about coalition policy. The only thing he has answered this question about, the Prime Minister, is coalition policy.
Well,
so he was asked about modelling. Is he aware of any modelling that the Treasurer had done on any policy, any of the socialist policies? Yes, I wasn't invited. You're correct, Prime Minister.
Resume your seat. It's not an open mic session, Manager of Opposition Business. Resume your seat. Order. Order. Okay. People are entitled to raise the point of order. It was a very broad question, and the question was about any modelled views by Treasury on these proposals. The Leader of the Opposition, just going to dial it down. We're just going to get the Prime Minister to be directly relevant to the question. He can talk about opposition policies, but in terms of his answer, he's got to be directly relevant to the policy he was asked about.
I'm being directly relevant to what I was asked about, which was policies from non-government members raised last week. Now, I know that after their party room, things are a bit difficult there, but we saw the Manager of Opposition Business just say he didn't want to go to the round table. Well, the Shadow, talk to the bloke next to you, because he was there. He was there. He got an invite, and he was keen. He even came to drinks at the Lodge, and he was very welcome. 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 And they also had, of course, a policy that they're trying to implement tonight, the higher taxes on the housing construction industry by abolishing build-to-rent. We want to assist the building of more homes. They want to abolish those concessions. They also, of course, went through with higher student debts for more than 3 million Australians, not proceeding with the 20% cut, bigger mortgages for tens of thousands of Australians because they said that abolish Help to Buy, higher power bills with the abolition of the cheaper home battery scheme, and more expensive training courses with the abolition of free TAFE. Those opposite actually went to an election arguing for higher taxes and bigger deficits. That is some achievement.
Has concluded. The call to the honourable member for Blair.
Speaker, my question is to the Minister for Housing, Homelessness and Cities. How is the Albanese Labor government making it easier for Australians to get into home ownership, and what are the obstacles?
Call to the Minister for Housing, the Minister for Homelessness and the Minister for Cities.
Wonderful. Thanks, Speaker. And I want to thank the member for Blair for his question. He is such a big supporter of giving his community better opportunities for home ownership. And he tops the league table, Speaker. Since our government was elected, 3,416 people in his local community have got into home ownership with the backing of the Albanese government. And I know that the member cannot wait to get back to his beautiful part of our country to tell potential first home buyers that even more support is on the way from the Albanese government. Now, Speaker, housing is very tough in Australia today, and that's why our government has built a $43 billion agenda with policies that are making a real difference to the lives of Australians. Just since we were elected, 180,000 people around our country have bought their first home with our 5% deposit program. More than 1 million households, Speaker, have gotten a 45% increase to Commonwealth rent assistance. 500,000 homes have been built, new housing approvals are up 30%, and we've got 28,000 social and affordable homes in planning or construction today. Now, Mr Speaker, we know that the key to addressing Australia's housing crisis is to build, build, build. We've got to build more homes more quickly, and that's why the majority of that $43 billion package is aimed at improving supply. Alongside those measures, our party has a strong view that we should be doing more to help first home buyers to get into the market now. Yesterday, our Prime Minister announced that from the 1st of October, every single first home buyer around the country can get into the housing market with just a 5% deposit. Now, Speaker, I know it's not just me. All of us speak to younger people in our community and hear about the fact that that 20% deposit is the main barrier for the next generation getting access to home ownership. The expansion of this 5% deposit scheme will change lives. Speaker, this will mean tens of thousands of additional Australians who will get the security, the stability and the joy that owning your own home brings. The PM and I both talked yesterday about our fantastic visit to Abbey and Lockie and Chile, and they spoke to us about this experience they have of spending their 20s paying off their own mortgage, not someone else's. Well, we're fighting to give more Australians that opportunity. And, Speaker, they're just one of so many families that I meet whose lives have been changed by our policies. We want to expand the opportunity for home ownership to more young Australians. We can do it, Speaker, and Labor believes that we should. Now, Speaker, we know that housing is a real challenge for people right around the country. That's why you're seeing our government step up and tackle this crisis from every single angle. We are building more homes, we're helping renters get a better deal, and we are bloody proud to be helping more Australians realise their dream of home ownership.
Just remind the Minister not to use that language during her answers. Before I call the member, I have a number of acknowledgements I'll do together now for the House. I'm pleased to inform the House that present in the gallery today is a delegation from the Republic of Fiji led by the Deputy Prime Minister, the Honourable Binman Prasad, and they are joined by His Excellency Mr Ajay Bameret, the High Commissioner of the Republic of Fiji, Bulavanaka. I'm pleased to also inform the House that we are joined by the Most Honourable the Marquess of Salisbury, former Leader of the Opposition in the House of Lords and Parliamentary Under-Secretary of State for Defence, and also members of the Australian Union of Jewish Students are in the gallery today. and Ms Selina Ubo, the Leader of the Opposition in the Northern Territory Legislative Assembly, and Anthony Marsh, the Mayor of Mornington Peninsula Shire, Mark Stormer, the CEO of the Mornington Peninsula Shire, and Josh Sinclair, CEO of the Committee for Frankston, the Mornington Peninsula, as guests of the member for Flinders. And give the call to the member for Mayo.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Aged Care and Seniors. On 31st March, 87,597 older Australians were assessed and waiting for home care at their approved level. As of today, that figure is estimated to be over 100,000. Older Australians are dying while waiting for aged care. What justification does the government have for delaying the promised additional home care packages from July to November this year?
The call to the Minister for Aged Care and the Minister for Seniors.
Thank you, Mr Speaker, and I thank the member for her question. And I acknowledge her legitimate interest and commitment to ensuring that all older people across her community can access safe, dignified and high-quality aged care. In the last term of Parliament, my predecessor, the now Minister for Communications, worked across the Parliament to pass the new Aged Care Act with bipartisan support from the opposition and constructive contribution from the crossbench. And we're preparing to implement that new Act on the 1st of November, along with the Support at Home program, which is the updated program replacing the current home care packages program. These are once-in-a-generation reforms, and they will deliver world-class aged care services to the older people who worked so hard to build our country and to whom we owe the very best care. Support at Home will deliver a system that helps older people to stay at home for longer by making a higher level of care available in the home. This is an entirely reformed program. It is not an extension of the current program. It is an adapted model of care in the home. As our population ages, we've seen demand for in-home care grow very, very fast. There are now more than 300,000 people accessing home care packages today, compared to just 150,000 people back in 2020. Mr Speaker, as I've said before, we are currently delivering more care to more people than ever before. When Support at Home starts on the 1st of November, we will roll out an additional 80,000 home care places in the first 12 months. Until then, my number one priority is ensuring that older people continue to receive care and services. And until November, we'll continue to assign packages every single week. The average since September last year, the weekly average, is 2,700 packages a week. And I can assure the member that people who are assessed as high priority will continue to receive their packages within a month. Mr Speaker, the brief deferral of the commencement of the new Aged Care Act is to ensure that programs like Support at Home are ready for older Australians and their families. The Labor government continues to deliver more care for more Australians, and we've given aged care providers more time to prepare their clients, support their workers and get their systems ready for these historic changes.
Call to the honourable member for Moreton.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Prime Minister. How is the government delivering on its commitment to help Australians get into secure housing, and what have been the responses?
Call to the Prime Minister.
I thank the member for Moreton for her question. And of course, we have a $43 billion Homes for Australia plan, something that is helping more first home buyers, something that's helping to expand home ownership, something that is assisting renters, but also supporting people by an expansion of social housing as well. And the figures are in. New home starts are up strongly. New dwelling commencements were up 17% in the March quarter. Completions of new homes are up 3.7% compared to a year ago. All up, nearly 500,000 new homes being added to stock since we came to office. Housing approvals are up 30% compared to a year ago. And in 2023-24, almost 9,000 more firms entered the building industry than exited. Importantly, construction cost inflation has fallen from a half-century high under the former government, which were at 17% when the coalition left office, fallen down to 1.6% under Labor. And yesterday we announced our fast-tracking of the 5% deposit plan. But I note the support that that's received from first home buyers means wiping years off the time it takes to save for a deposit and saving thousands of dollars in mortgage insurance. Overwhelmingly, this has been welcomed by young Australians who dream of home ownership. But I regret to inform the House that it hasn't been welcomed by everyone. Yesterday morning, the Coalition's housing spokesperson went on 2GB and said, "Why should the children of billionaires get access to a government program?" The children of billionaires he was talking about. But by the time he got on the Radio National, the class war was advancing. I mean, this is what he said. "I mean, this is an uncapped scheme which is available to billionaires," he went on to say. Now, the idea that if you are a billionaire, you're out there worried about whether you get a 5% deposit or a 20% deposit probably isn't the objective of the people this is aimed at. It's aimed at people like Abby and Lockie, who we met yesterday, 23-year-olds trying to get into their first home, who've stayed with Abby's mum and dad in order to save a deposit. But it's extraordinary. It's extraordinary that those opposite just don't get it. Just don't get it. And yesterday they were going to have the vote on it in the Senate, but it's been postponed for a day because he was in his second home at the Sky News studio. He was on Credlin being interviewed by Steve Price because not even Credlin was on Credlin last night.
Order. When the House comes to order, we shall hear from the Leader of the Opposition.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Prime Minister. The Prime Minister said, quote, "The only tax policy that we're implementing is the one that we took to the election." However, when asked about possible tax changes, the Treasurer was open-minded, saying, quote, "It's a matter for Cabinet." Can the Prime Minister confirm that, having successfully eliminated the members for Chifley and Isaacs from Cabinet, the Treasurer is now working on eliminating Australian savings with a fresh round of taxes?
Order. Order. The member for Bruce. There's far too much noise, particularly in the corner. The Prime Minister has the call and will be heard in silence.
Well, credit where credit's due, Mr Speaker. It takes some guts to talk about division in a party room. From people who've just come from a room over there where they were queuing up. The leader of the Liberal Party in the Senate, led the charge to abolish net zero in the party room today. And they were queuing up, one after the other, They are all over the shop, Mr Speaker.
Order. The member
all
for Forest.
Over the shop. So we now have two former Deputy Prime Ministers getting together. I mean, one of the great romances we've ever seen in this place, Mr Speaker. The member for Riverina and the member for New England.
Order. The member for Solomon. Order. The member for Canning. I'd like to hear from the Manager of Opposition Business.
Thank you, Speaker. Unsurprisingly, this is on relevance. Every question the Prime Minister is not addressing anywhere near the subject matter of the question. He seems obsessed with the Coalition and its happenings, but he's been asked about matters affecting the government and its policy, and he refuses to answer. The last answer, he didn't even get to the question. This time he's following the same pattern.
You did say there was division, which clearly...
Look, order. I agree with the manager, but when there is a pretty broad political brushstroke through a question, as this one was, it wasn't a fact, a figure, which I know sometimes is the theme of a question, but this one was, in any objective terminology, was a very broad political structured question. So I'm just going to invite the Prime Minister, now that he's had the preamble, to perhaps not focus on the opposition's policy, but he can also compare and contrast, but that can't be his whole answer.
Speaker, I missed the question. I just heard the sledge, and I'm responding to it as I respond to the sledges across the chamber.
Order,
Mr. Speaker. But what it boils down to, I mean, it's hard to follow the plots over there. The Liberals fighting each other, the Nats fighting each other, the Liberals then fighting the Nats, and when they go to their party conferences, it's everyone fighting the leadership of the Liberal Party and the National Party. I mean, they go to a party conference up in Queensland. They say that you should argue in favour of modernisation and we should support net zero, and we need to learn the lessons of the past. But what we see is just division, no policy being put forward, and now we're reduced to just sledging.
When the member for Hume finishes. When you finish. Yeah, great. The manager on another point of order.
The Prime Minister is defying your ruling. Consistent with
Resume your seat. Resume your seat. Order. And the House comes to order. Order. We're going to hear from the honourable member for Macquarie.
Thank you, Speaker. My question's to the Treasurer. What progress has been made in the housing market, and what are the next steps informed by the Economic Reform Roundtable? And are there any other approaches the government's being asked to consider?
Call to the Treasurer.
Thanks, Mr Speaker, and I thank the wonderful member for Macquarie for her important question. Housing is a big focus of this Labor government, and it was an area where much welcome and meaningful progress was made at the Economic Reform Roundtable last week. I pay tribute to the Housing Minister again for the work that went into that and the work that has followed that as well, because the housing challenge was ignored in a wasted decade of missed opportunities and messed up priorities under our predecessors, where they racked up mountains of debt and deficits and still made no meaningful investments in addressing this housing challenge. Now, we're working very hard to turn that around. We've seen some progress, and that's welcome, but we know that there is much more for us to do to hit our ambitious targets. But just today, Mr Speaker, the Reserve Bank, in their meeting minutes from August, released the minutes that said this: dwelling investment was showing clear signs of strengthening, Mr Speaker. And as the PM said a moment ago, there are a number of ways that we are seeing this progress. Building approvals are up almost 30% compared to a year ago. When we came to office, they were going backwards by 20%. Dwelling commencements are up 17.3% in annual terms. They were falling 28.5% when we came to office, the biggest fall in 2 decades under those opposite. Dwelling investment now growing at 5.6%. It was going backwards 5.1% when we came to office. Importantly, the key driver was investment in new builds, which rose 6.3% compared to falling 8.4% when we came to office. Cost growth in construction has also moderated substantially. That part of the CPI grew 0.4% through the year. It was growing 19.4% when we came to office. And so we're investing more in this challenge than any government in the nation's history. We've added to that plan in the past couple of days. We are blitzing the approvals backlog. We are building more homes. We are pausing and streamlining the National Construction Code. We are fast-tracking assessment of more than 26,000 homes. And today we've announced that we are also accelerating our reforms of national environment laws, Mr Speaker. We will introduce legislation here before the end of the year to deliver this. So the Reform Roundtable has provided important consensus and important momentum around these next steps: blitzing the backlog, pausing the code, streamlining environmental assessments will all help to clean up the mess that was left to us by those opposite when it came to housing. They had a wasted decade in housing of missed opportunity and warped priorities. We are turning that around. We're seeing some progress. We know we've got more to do.
Call to the member for Page.
Thank you, Speaker. Speaker, my question is to the Assistant Treasurer. Minister, family trusts are a vital tool for farming families to manage their businesses. Will the government rule out tax changes to family trusts?
Give a call to the Assistant Treasurer and the Minister for Financial Services.
What I'll say to those opposite is that this government held an important forum for people from right around this country to put their ideas towards the government so that we can look at productivity, resilience and sustainability going forward. What we can also say is that this government is focused on delivering our election commitments. Our election commitments include sustaining tax cuts for every single Australian taxpayer. And what I can say is that those opposite went to the last election saying they would vote down those tax cuts. There is a direct contrast when it comes to tax between those opposite and what we're putting forward. What we've said is that we have not changed any of our positions on tax. We have clear tax policies that we took to the last election, which included that one, which included a 20% reduction in HECS, which was our very first bill that we brought to this parliament and which was the first bill that we passed through this parliament in both this chamber and the Senate. That was a critical part of our tax strategy. And we will be bringing forward another important tax policy when it comes to payday super.
The minister's concluded. Okay. Order. Order. When the House comes to order, we'll hear from the honourable member for Leichhardt.
Thank you, Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Infrastructure, Transport, Regional Development and Local Government. How is the Albanese Labor government supporting access to housing in regional Australia and cleaning up the housing mess the government inherited?
Call to the Minister for Infrastructure, Transport, Regional Development and Local Government.
Thanks very much, and can I thank the member for Leichhardt for the question. He's just an extraordinary advocate.
Minister will pause. The Minister's been speaking for 7 seconds, and the member for Fisher thinks it's appropriate just to be yelling across the chamber at her. So, no more from the member for Fisher, and he's going to show her respect while the minister is addressing the House. She has the call.
Thank you, and I'm sure the member for Fisher would agree just what a fabulous member the member for Leichhardt is in representing regional Australia and particularly the fantastic parts of regional Queensland. Well, of course, when it comes to housing, for too long, regional Australians were doing it tough. Under those opposite, housing affordability and availability in the regions was frankly left to slide. Families were priced out, renters had no security, and essential workers couldn't live in the towns or couldn't afford to live in the towns where they needed to work. Now, this government knows that our regions deserve much better than this, and we are taking real practical action to support access to housing in regional Australia. Of course, the announcement we made yesterday, from the 1st of October 2025, more regional Australians will be able to access Labor's 5% home deposits. All first home buyers in regional Australia will be eligible to qualify. We know the difference that paying a 5% deposit will make to regional Australians and without having to pay that lender's mortgage insurance. From the 1st of October, not too far away, there will be no income limits and the property price caps will better reflect the cost of a home across Australia. And those living in the regions will be able to access more housing and sooner because of this decision. Since this government changed the home guarantee scheme when we came to a government, we've issued over 23,500 home guarantees in the regions, and we've supported some 38,500 regional Australians into home ownership. That would not have happened under those opposite. This builds on our existing $1.5 billion that we're putting into the home support program to build the enabling infrastructure to deliver more homes where they are needed. It means we're speeding up planning processes, funding new infrastructure, including in the member for Capricornia's electorate, down to the member for Riverina's electorate as well, and across in Western Australia. We know that for many young Australians particularly, it is too hard to get into into housing and get into their first home in the regions. We are getting on with the job of getting regional Australians into the housing market, and these changes will give a real shot in the arm to those young people, to those other people across our communities who are desperate to get into their first homes, particularly in the regions that we represent.
The call to the honourable member for Mallee.
Thank you, Speaker. My question is to the Assistant Treasurer. Will the government make any changes this term to the tax treatment of farming families?
Call to the Assistant Treasurer and Minister for Financial Services. Order.
I thank the honourable member for her question. And what I would say is that when it comes to the tax system, the Shadow Treasurer made some interesting comments in the lead-up to the roundtable where he said, well, let's be fair dinkum here, we shouldn't be taking anything off the table. So when it comes to their spokesperson on tax, he said that we shouldn't take anything off the table, and he said there's no doubt that the entire tax system needs to be reviewed. So we are here for a serious discussion, about the future of this country when it comes to productivity, when it comes to resilience and when it comes to budget sustainability. But what I can stress again is that we took a range of tax policies to the last election. Implementing those tax policies is our priority. That remains our priority, and that is something which those opposition should have a think about when it comes to their own policies, which were rejected roundly at the last election. It'll be interesting to hear what their policy is.
Order. Order. The House comes to order. We're going to hear from the member for Macon.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Veterans Affairs and Defence Personnel. How is the Albanese Labor government supporting veterans at risk of homelessness get into housing? What delays were there to delivering this important support?
Call to the Minister for Veterans Affairs and the Minister for Defence Personnel.
Well, thank you, Speaker, and I thank the marvellous member for Macon for this important question, because when it comes to the very important issue of veteran homeless, which I wouldn't have thought I'd be receiving any interjections about, we know that every year there are around 6,000 veterans that are at risk of homelessness. During the 2021 census night, there were some 1,500 Australian veterans that found themselves homeless. Veterans are 3 times more likely to experience homelessness over their lifetime than the general Australian population. And that's why, in the lead-up to the 2022 election, as part of our election commitment for a $10 billion Housing Australia Future Fund, we included setting aside $30 million to assist veterans who are experiencing or at risk of homelessness. And not just to provide the buildings, but to make sure that they were provided with the necessary and important wraparound support services to get them back onto their feet as well. You would think that the support for such a program would have been entirely bipartisan and rushed through the parliament to make sure that we could provide that housing support to veterans that found themselves at risk of homelessness. But what we actually found was that the Liberal Party and the National Party and the Greens Party decided to work together in a coalition, blocking that legislation in the Senate, holding up the rolling out of that essential funding to support our veterans. So what was the impact? Well, it meant that $24 million for capital works. It meant that $6 million for specialist services to support our veterans were held up. But in June of last year, we were finally able to roll that funding out to support our veterans. It meant that 8 organisations around Australia have been funded for capital works programs to build more homes to support veterans that are experiencing homelessness. And importantly, 5 organisations around Australia have been funded to provide those wraparound intense support services to better support veterans who are experiencing homelessness so they can get back on their feet, which is what I would have thought all party members in this parliament would want to see happen. But instead what we saw was those services being held up by those opposite. Veterans who are experiencing homelessness, not able to get access to the services that they need in a timely way because that funding was being held up by the Liberal Party and the National Party and the Greens. We are a government that is committed to supporting people getting into a home. whether that's through buying a home, whether that's being able to access a rental, or for people who need to be able to access that emergency and transitional housing when they need it, including our veterans, who, quite frankly, we would have thought would be the people most likely to receive the support from those opposite when they find themselves on those hard times, but that's not what we saw, Mr Speaker.
Call to the honourable member for Wentworth.
This question is for the Prime Minister. The last summer was one of the hardest in memory for my Jewish community, when it was terrorised by anti-Semitic attacks, including on the Lewis Continental Kitchen. Today we learned that the Iranian government was behind the Lewis Kitchen attack, the Atta synagogue attack and potentially more. The security concerns of my community are real and justified. Will the government work with the community to keep them safe?
Call to the Prime Minister.
I thank the member for Wentworth for her question and for her constructive engagement on behalf of her community about these issues. And I think all Australians have been concerned about the rise in anti-Semitism and the rise of social division that has occurred. And I have visited the synagogue in Bondi Junction there and spoken directly with the community. I have visited the Jewish Museum in the members' electorate, where we announced additional funding for an expansion, and indeed met some wonderful survivors of the Holocaust who went through their personal experiences as well. The information that ASIO has determined is quite shocking. This is a serious attack perpetrated, essentially, on behalf of a foreign government on Australian soil. And the fact that the intelligence agencies, as well as the Australian Federal Police, have undertaken this work, they've worked very closely with the Jewish community and with other communities as well. We informed the Jewish community leaders prior to the 1 o'clock press conference that was held this afternoon as well, so that they could watch what the Director-General of ASIO, in particular Mr Burgess, had to say, because that was so important. The attack on the Lewis Continental Kitchen, of course, occurred on October 20. There was another attack that we saw on a restaurant in Melbourne in more recent times as well. People can have different views about the Middle East, and it's absolutely legitimate for people to put forward those views. What is not legitimate is to blame Jewish Australians if they disagree with the policy of the Israeli government, or to blame Arab or Muslim Australians for the actions of Hamas or other people. What we need to do is to make sure that we advance peace and security for people in Israel and Palestine. But what we certainly can have control over here is making sure that we don't bring conflict here, that we promote social cohesion. And I congratulate the member, because that is something I know she has been undertaking, as the local member for Wentworth. We have, of course, a range of programs, including the increased security arrangements around schools, around synagogues, the increased support that we have put forward. Will continue to have dialogue with the community and to work with them in order to ensure that, like other Australians, every Australian should feel safe. And yesterday I spoke with the Australian Union of Jewish Students, who are here, somewhere here, again, as I have every year for a long period of time. They tell stories about harassment on campuses, just like students in your area have been impacted because they're easily identifiable because of their school uniform. That's not the Australian way. The Australian way is to respect each other regardless of people's faith, regardless of their origin, and to engage in constructive dialogue about issues, not to engage in the sort of activity which we have seen. We've taken strong action against Iran as a result of this. My government stands by it. I know it's received the support of the opposition. I'm sure the member for Wentworth as well, and I would hope every member of this parliament supports the strong action which we have taken, which is entirely appropriate given the revelations and the findings that the ASIO Director-General and the Australian Federal Police have found.
Call to the honourable member for Bullwinkle.
Thank you, Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Resources. How is the Albanese Labor government creating new jobs and building Australia's future by growing our critical minerals industry? What proposals might threaten Australia's resource sector?
The call to the Minister for Northern Australia and the Minister for Resources.
Thank you, Mr Speaker, and I thank the member for Bullwinkle for her terrific question. Australia has all the critical minerals the world needs to reach net zero and all the rare earths we need for our national security. The Albanese Labor government is committed to creating new jobs by boosting this all-important critical minerals industry. We want to mine, process, concentrate and refine more critical minerals and rare earths here in Australia, and we're making that happen every single day in this place and around the country. We've introduced $17 billion of production tax credits for critical minerals to process more here and create thousands of jobs in the process. Well, one of the proposals that might threaten that, of course, was the opposition's continuing opposition to that production tax credit. We've invested $3.4 billion in resourcing Australia's prosperity so that Geoscience Australia can keep accumulating that all-important pre-competitive data for industry. Combine that with contributions from the Critical Minerals Facility, Export Finance Australia and the National Reconstruction Fund, and that all adds up to a $28 billion investment in the future of Australian resources sector, which will create new jobs and new opportunities. Mr Speaker, no government has done more for the resources industry than the Albanese Labor government. If I can turn to the NAIF for a moment, the Northern Australia Infrastructure Facility has invested $735 million in critical minerals projects right across Northern Australia. Alpha HPA's high-purity alumina project in Gladstone, Arafura's project in Alice Springs in the NT, Element 25's Butcherbird Manganese project in the Pilbara, the Thunderbird Mineral Sands project in the Kimberley, Pilbara Minerals lithium project in Port Hedland.
Order.
All of these projects will add up to jobs in the north. The NAIF has also supported great projects like BCI Minerals Mardi Salt project and the Perdaman Urea project in the Pilbara, which will produce fertiliser for our farmers. Now, Mr Speaker, I'm asked about proposals that might threaten the resources sector and therefore the critical minerals industry. And, I've got one. I've got one proposal that I've heard of, and that was made in April this year, and that was about making gas a critical mineral. Yes, Mr Speaker, that's what these opposite proposed way back in April. They wanted to make gas a critical mineral. Of course, it can't be because it's not a mineral. But those opposite, they might have thought that everyone forgot about that little thought bubble. Well, absolutely, we did not. But I tell you what, no one has forgotten about. No one has forgotten about how they opposed the production tax credits, which is the single biggest investment in the critical minerals and rare earths industry in this country, which will drive our national security, which will drive our energy independence, which will drive our resources independence, and those opposite opposed it all the way.
The minister's time has concluded. The call to the member for Forrest.
Thanks, Mr Speaker, and my question is to the Minister for Housing. With the government failing to deliver on its commitment to build 1.2 million new homes, new taxes on the family home were raised at the government's three-day talkfest. So will the minister rule out slugging Australians with new taxes on their spare bedrooms?
The call to the Minister for Housing, the Minister for Homelessness and the Minister for Cities.
Speaker, I don't know what bizarre fantasy land those opposite have been living in. What on earth are they talking about? Now, I've heard that these questions are getting asked over in the other place today, and I thought, God, the Housing Minister, the Shadow Housing Minister, hasn't had his Weet-Bix for breakfast this morning. I mean, I don't know what he's going on about. But the fact that we've got people in the House of Representatives asking ridiculous questions like this, get a clue, guys. Get a clue, guys. Yes, let me talk to you about our government's tax policy, Speaker, because they're absolutely clear, Speaker.
No, the Minister will pause. The member for Forrest, we don't It's not going to happen that way. You've asked the question. It's not just then a free-for-all after that. So you're just going to show respect to the minister while she's on her feet. Order, just as you were shown respect when you asked the question. Order. The manager of opposition business is also not helping this situation. Well, just cool it. The minister in continuation.
Speaker, our tax policies are absolutely clear. We stand for lower taxes that we've delivered to the Australian people, and lower taxes that were opposed by those opposite, Speaker. Now, not only did they go to an election saying that they did not want lower taxes for every Australian taxpayer, but they said that they would come into the parliament and legislate for higher taxes for every Australian taxpayer. Now, let me come to the matter of housing taxation, Speaker.
No, the minister is addressing your question. Resume your seat.
Yeah. So let me come to the question of housing taxation, Speaker. What a day to ask a question about housing taxation when our party has lowered taxes on new build-to-rent locations, and you are in the Senate today trying to raise taxes on new housing in our country. Now, Speaker, I wish I could say that I was surprised by the unbelievable incompetence. I do not know what the opposition are doing on housing this term and any other. But what I would remind the House Speaker is that the very last people that Australians should listen to when it comes to housing policy are those who sit opposite, Speaker. Remember that for almost a decade they sat on these Treasury benches and did nothing about a housing crisis which was building before their very eyes. They then spent 3 years, Speaker, being housing hypocrites, complaining about things going wrong in housing and then coming into the parliament and voting against measures that would fix the problem. And here they are now asking ridiculous and nonsensical questions about policies that don't even exist. Get a clue, people.
Give the call to the honourable member for Corangamite.
Thank you, Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Social Services. How is the Albanese Labor government helping to ease cost of living pressures for Australians and tackle challenges in the social services portfolio?
Call to the Minister for Social Services.
Well, thank you so much, Mr Speaker, and I want to thank the member for Corangamite for her question and for the wonderful local member she is. Of course, we are proud on this side of the chamber of the economic management that's seen the creation of more than 1.1 million jobs. We're proud of the fact that for those on the minimum wage, they've seen that minimum wage increase by around $9,000 since we came to government. But we're also proud of the fact that when people can't work, we stand up for them and we help them out. And that's particularly true for aged pensioners. That's why I'm so very pleased to say that from the 20th of September this year, we'll see increases again for more than 5 million social security recipients in what they will see in their bank accounts each fortnight. That includes 2.5 million aged pensioners. So those people who are on the full rate of the age pension will be about $30 a fortnight better off because of those increases coming on the 20th of September. And that means that someone on the full rate of the age pension is about $5,000 a year better off since we came to government. It's also true of people on JobSeeker, about $4,000 a year better off since we came to government. Rent assistance, as the Housing Minister continues to remind us, has also increased by about 45%. So if you're a single-rate age pensioner paying $550 a week rent, you're about $1,800 a year better off because of the increase to Commonwealth rent assistance on its own. And that comes on top of all of the other cost of living measures, the cheaper childcare, cheaper medicines, energy bill relief, cuts to student debt, free TAFE and, of course, the $43 billion Homes for Australia plan. On the 20th of September, we'll also see another change for social security recipients, and that's a change to our approach on deeming. Some social security recipients with financial assets will see a change to their payments as a result of the unfreezing of deeming rates. Now, during COVID, we on this side supported the Morrison government to freeze deeming rates. They were frozen by the Morrison government for 2 years, and on coming to government, we added another 3 years to that freeze of deeming rates. But as other COVID measures have come to an end, so it is time to gradually unfreeze deeming rates as well. That freeze has saved people affected by deeming about $1.8 billion over the period. But as people do a few hours of paid work, it's not fair for them to be punished in comparison to people who receive income from their investments.
Order.
So we'll be unfreezing those deeming
has
rates.
concluded. The call to the honourable member for Warringah.
To the Environment Minister. Australian plastic use has doubled since 2005, and Australians are one of the world's largest users of single-use plastic. Without intervention, this figure will continue to rise. With only 14% of this waste recycled, the majority of it is sent to landfill or ends up in our oceans, rivers and waterways. Plastic pollution harms the environment, human health, exposure to chemicals impacts everyone. With the negotiations on the Global Plastic Treaty not finding consensus, will the government update our National Plastics Plan as recommended by the Drowning in Waste report?
Give the call to the Leader of the House representing the Minister for the Environment.
Thanks very much, and I thank the member for Warringah for the question. The issues around plastic pollution are huge, and it was some time ago that the data was put out that I think every Environment Minister subsequently has used, which is by I think it's by 2050. The weight of plastic in the ocean is expected to be more than the weight of the fish. And so plastic pollution is something that is a global problem. Our oceans are a global asset. And to deal with this is going to require global solutions. Australia has a strong ambition to finalise a global plastics treaty. We've played a key role during those negotiations. When the Albanese government was elected, we joined what's known as the High Ambition Coalition to End Plastic Pollution, and we're continuing to work with other nations, businesses, NGOs and civil society. Plastic pollution is still set to triple by 2060. Experts predict plastics in oceans, I've mentioned outweighing the fish, by 2050. We're working towards an agreement that would globally ban problematic plastics and harmful chemicals, create universal standards and end plastic pollution by 2040. We know that that involves action which needs to also happen at home. This government has already delivered over $1 billion with governments in industry to boost recycling by 1.4 million tonnes each year, including $60 million for soft plastics and creating over 3,000 ongoing and construction jobs. This is something, and we're, as I say, fighting on the international stage for a binding treaty to end plastic pollution by 2040. All members are concerned about this, but obviously members like the member for Warringah have a very special relationship with their communities, have a very special relationship with this because people see it at the beach. People see very directly what is there at the beach and want to know that the government and their local members are raising the issue and acting to deal with it. The government is committed to being part of that international action, and I acknowledge the long-standing commitment on this issue from the member for Warringah.
Put the call to the member for Menzies.
Thank you, Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Energy and Climate Change. How is the Albanese Labor government getting on with the job of delivering its clear and consistent climate and energy policy agenda? How does this compare with other approaches to energy policy?
Call to the Minister for Climate Change and Energy.
I thank the member for Menzies for his question, and I'll get straight to the point. 38,921, Mr Speaker. That's how many cheaper home batteries have been installed in Australia since July 1. That's how Australians respond to clear policy direction from the Australian government, and regional Australians in particular. I told the House yesterday I think that the member for Gilmore has the biggest take-up in New South Wales, the member for Indi has the biggest take-up in Victoria, the member for Wright has the biggest take-up in Queensland, the member for Canning has the biggest take-up in Western Australia, getting on with the job of the transition to net zero, And the member for Mayo has the biggest take-up in South Australia, and in fact the biggest take-up in Australia does the member for Mayo of cheaper home batteries. Now, this is, as I said, how Australians respond to clear policies. And the honourable member asked me if there's any alternative approaches. I'm glad he used the plural. I think that was a very well-worded question, because we are replete with alternative approaches from those opposite, and that's just the leadership group. Within the leadership group, we are replete with alternative approaches to the question of climate change. We saw in the Liberal and National Party room this morning a push to get straight to abolishing net zero. Senator Canavan said they shouldn't wait for the Canavan review. He wants to get straight on to abolishing their support for net zero. He said on Sky News last night that net zero is, and I quote, a great socialist plan. He is on to us.
Morrison government.
It's about time somebody stood up to those socialists in the Morrison-Joyce government who embarked on the policy of net zero. I'll convene an urgent meeting of the Socialist International to discuss this matter. We're just waiting on the availability of Boris Johnson and Theresa May, Friedrich Merz and Angela Merkel, and the two-thirds of Australian companies who are dedicated to net zero. Mr Speaker, we're waiting on their availability, then we'll have a meeting. And in the Liberal Party room, the leader of the Liberal Party in the Senate said there's no time to waste to abolish net zero. I saw it on Sky News. It must be true. You shouldn't deny it. It's on Sky News all day that Senator Cash has led this charge, trying to keep up with the leader of the National Party who went to the conference on the weekend to undermine the leader of the Liberal Party, who said they're out of the coalition unless they have their way. You know, Mr Speaker, what we have is two parties, one coalition, and many, many ways of killing net zero. And all that leads to net zero plan for the future of Australia. Net zero plan for Australia's regions who are relying on the Australian government to deal with the challenges of climate change and the impacts of drought and flood. Net zero plan for Australians who need the jobs of the future to be created by a sensible plan to achieve net zero, which the Morrison-Joyce government once believed in. That's the replete alternatives we have from those opposite. Meanwhile, the Albanese government and Australian households, 38,921 of them, get on with the job.
Call the Prime Minister.
I ask that further questions be placed on the notice paper.